France is famous for its generous social safety net. It's been said the country is a paradise inhabited by people who think they're living in hell.
Well, critics say it's a Byzantine ball and chain for the economy that's unsustainable in the long run, while defenders say it's a treasured jewel that needs protecting.
So just how good are the benefits of the French system? What do the French think about it really? And who foots the massive bill?
Join us for this episode of French Connections Plus, where we explore the hot button issue that is France's social safety net.
When we talk about social protection in France, la protection sociale, we're talking about a very broad umbrella.
Well, there's a complex network of institutions to protect people financially against what's called les aléas de la vie, the bumps in the road of life, like old age or unemployment or sickness.
But the system is so big that critics have accused France of being a nanny state, treating its citizens like overgrown children.
Well, the state certainly does a lot. It produces legal texts, it oversees the various agencies, and it partially funds social protection through things like taxes and subsidies.
There are many levels of social protection here in France, but the very heart of it all is what the French call social security.
La sécurité sociale is a cherished institution in France, and it covers a lot.
La Sécurité sociale, or la Sécu as it's commonly called, is a cherished part of the French social model that's been credited with making people live longer and better. Set up in the wake of World War II, it's based on the principle of solidarity. Individuals contribute in proportion to their means and benefit accordingly. There are four main branches to Sécurité sociale that correspond to the four big risks in life. The first branch covers old age and is in charge of distributing pensions. The second covers family benefits, given to all families with at least 2 children. The third distributes insurance for workplace accidents, and the fourth branch deals with sickness. It's a vast branch that covers the cost of general medicine, but also things like maternity leave. Lovingly called la vieille dame, the old lady, la Sécu is a generous system that's had a tendency to overspend. For years, it faced a towering deficit called the Trou de la Sécu, a massive hole that's dried up in recent years thanks to belt-tightening measures. But with an aging population, many wonder how sustainable the system is in the long run.
Another important facet of French social protection is a complex unemployment insurance system, one of the most generous in the world.
Well, Assurance Chômage was created in 1958, and it has 2 missions. First of all, to hand out unemployment benefits, but also to help people find a new job.
So let's say, unfortunately, you've lost your job here in France. What happens next?
Well, you go to your local job center, which is called Pôle emploi, and you prove that you're available and looking for work. And then for the next 2 years, you'll be eligible for benefits. Now, the amount you get depends on your work history, but on average, people get about 60% of their previous income.
And this for 2 years. So obviously people get a lot out of the system, but they pay into the system as well.
Indeed, because Assurance Chômage is actually funded by contributions from employers, but also employees.
So on your monthly pay slip as an employee, you can see the amount that you're paying into the unemployment insurance fund, as well as retirement, health care, everything else that goes into Social Security.
It's a little bit of a headache, Jeannie, but people love it.
Bon, alors je trouve qu'on va dire qu'on n'est pas les plus mal lotis quand même.
En France, on est très très bien protégés aussi.
Un bon système, c'est simple d'utilisation, vous avez des applications aujourd'hui.
Je comprends pas qu'en France on fasse des grèves et qu'avec c'est le plus beau pays du monde.
C'est le fruit de plusieurs années de lutte et c'est des acquis qui aujourd'hui font la fierté.
Il reste encore l'esprit social, entraide.
À un moment donné, j'ai tout perdu et heureusement que j'ai eu cette sécurité-là.
On paye cher. En tant que patron, je vous dis on paye cher. Mais la vérité, tout le monde devrait être ravi.
Les problèmes actuellement, c'est qu'on veut nous le modifier et qu'on sait pas, on connaît pas les données du problème, si ce n'est faire des économies.
Je suis pas sûr qu'il faille adopter une logique marchande ou de rentabilité pour ces questions-là.
Il faut faire des économies, mais pas sur n'importe quoi. Pas sur les malheureux.
Après, il y a beaucoup de gens qui en profitent aussi, donc voilà.
Dans tout système, il y a des dérives, mais c'est pas du tout le fond du problème.
Moi, je paye des impôts et je suis bien contente d'être dans un système où ceux qui ont la chance participent à aider ceux qu'on n'a pas. Parce que rien n'est juste dans ce monde.
So the million-dollar question is, how much does it all cost?
Well, in 2018, France's social welfare programs cost over 740 billion euros, which represents over 31% of French GDP.
France is the country in Europe that spends the most of its national wealth on social protection.
And that makes it a hot-button political issue here in France.
Barely a day goes by without the country's generous social programs coming up for debate.
Well, critics, especially on the right, talk about la France des assistés. Essentially, France is spoiling its citizens with this generous program that's ultimately going to sink the country.
People on the left, however, are staunch defenders of France's social security and its principle of solidarity. In any case, it's certainly part of the French psyche.
To find out more about what France's social safety net means to the French, I'm joined by economist Claudia Sénic. Now, you're a professor at the Sorbonne University as well as at the Paris School of Economics, and you're the French specialist in the economics of happiness. Now, it's somewhat paradoxical because France is a safe country. It's one of the richest countries in the world as well. It has this very incredible social protection program, and yet the French are pessimistic. How can you explain that?
It's true that when you look at objective circumstances of the French, the way they feel about it is really less favorable than would happen if you suddenly took out all the French from the country and put the Belgians, for instance, and just by doing this without changing anything else, the average level of happiness would increase by one step in a 0-10 scale.
Okay.
So I think it's in the way we look at, or they look at reality, the way they transform the living conditions into satisfaction. Probably because they have a very high level of expectation. They expect a lot, they demand a lot. They have a reference to some ideal past that used to be better and more French.
Now, it's been said that France is a paradise inhabited by people who think that they're living in hell. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's true that there is something like this unsatisfying, and I think it's related to the transformation of society. All these things that are brought up by globalization, the change in the way in the labor market, the way people have to work, the occupations, all these things, which happen everywhere actually. But in France, it's resented, it's felt in a particularly painful way.
Mm-hmm. Because they expect a lot from the state, right? There's this incredible social protection program.
Yeah, exactly. So in France, there is this idea that we rely a lot on the state, we expect a lot from the state, we expect the state to protect people. And when the state is not able to do that, this is very stressful. And it is the fact that with globalization, the state, national states, usually have become small because it affects the capacity of the country to enact this social protection. It's a source of dissatisfaction.
And do you think the fact that the state is chipping away at France's social safety net has to do with this French malaise that we're seeing today?
Yeah, so it's the fact that these people of the French are very attached to this welfare system and social protection net, and it has to be reformed all the time because life changes and the world changes and life expectancy is increasing and people start working later, so we have to adjust to all this. But because there is a crisis of confidence, every time we have to change it, people are afraid that they're going to lose all the things that they fought for. So if they are afraid that they are going to lose the protection against the risk that they obtained in the past, it's frightening.
So the big question is, how can you increase happiness in France without spending too much money?
I think the big problem in France is pessimism and expectations about the future. I've seen in the surveys over and over again that the French are pessimistic, and not necessarily about their own private life. Mm-hmm. It's always
like a
private life is okay. It's always like this, but the economy, the country, the next generation in France, this is terrible. They're not really looking forward to all the transformations and everything that's coming. And that's the problem. I mean, it would be very useful if we could change this view and we could have a common collective project that we would all be enthusiastic or at least willing to embark on. What's lacking is un récit collectif, a common story that would unite people in a project and draw a picture of where we're going and we want to go there.
Unique French story.
A French story, yeah.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Thanks for being on the show.
Many of you had your own comments or questions about France's social safety net, and interestingly, many of you wanted to know what the French think about it themselves. For example, Keith Klotzel wrote to say, "I wonder if the French realize how good they have it."
Well, this being France, people love to complain, and there are really two schools here. There are those who complain that it costs too much and the system needs to be reformed for it to be sustainable for future generations, but then there are others who say, no, it's worth the cost. Reforms are going too far, and if you keep chipping away at our social safety net, what's going to be left?
Many foreigners looking at the situation in France just don't get it. How can polls show that many French people support the need for change, but also support the strikers who are going against the change? It's paradoxical.
This might be the French paradox, and it might be linked to our revolutionary past. But the truth is that change is tricky in France because people are very attached to something called les acquis sociaux, social gains that have been attained through sweat and tears and striking, and ultimately it comes down to a philosophical and existential question. What kind of society do you want to live in?
Now, that's a question I don't think we are ready to answer anytime soon, at least not in this show. Send us your thoughts, if you like, on Facebook, or you can always tweet Flo at Flo Vilmino.
And we'll see you next time for another episode of French Connections Plus.